Can Malik Willis get it done in Miami with a cupboard that is very bare as far as pass catchers go at the moment? What do we do with the Carolina Panthers running back situation with Jonathan Brooks on the mend? And how do we handle the Giants tight end situation with two talented athletic pass catchers there who will be catching passes from Jackson Dart? All that and much more. We've got a great show for you here tonight. Scott Hoyt, the 7-time FFPC League champion, joins us tonight. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Can't stand the pressure. I've seen greater men than need a lesson.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture. Are we not all our father's sons? I became a man. Nobody ever told me what a man was.
Thank you, Rob. Greetings and salutations to all of you Balkaholics. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I am your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is normally the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. He is off this week and will return next week. I got another great co-host popping in tonight, though. Coming up on tonight's show, we will talk about the situation going on with all the rookies in the NFL draft that will be drafted here in less than 2 weeks. I can't believe we almost made it. We're also going to be talking about how to handle the Arizona pass catchers this year, McBride, Marvin Harrison, and Michael Wilson, and so much more. Before we get into the show tonight, I want to remind you of a few things going on with the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Number one, FFPC Dynasty and Empire Dynasty Orphans are still available at myffpc.com/dynasty for sale, or you can just go to myffpc.com, click on the Dynasty Orphans drop down up at the top of your screen, and that will bring up all the leagues that we have available. 77 sold out, hundreds are pretty close to being sold out, but we do have some really good prices. Dave the Dizzle Gerzak told me to tell you ridiculous prices on some of the 250 teams, the 500s and the 750s, and so on and so forth. You can basically get these teams for free the first year and manage them to a championship, which is great. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. And while you're there, if you like playing best ball, we have 2 separate best ball tournaments going on right now. The Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament features a $40,000 grand prize. You can get in for $125 right now. And if you want to play Superflex, we have a Superflex Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, $35 to enter, and you could win 10 grand. Turn $35 into 10 grand. Who would not want to do that? The one downside about those tournaments, they will close when the NFL draft starts in a couple of weeks or less than a couple of weeks right now. Get in while you can at myffpc.com and take your shot at some really, really good values in these Never Too Early tournaments and turn that into a 5-figure grand prize. FFPC Big Gorilla does not feature a 5-figure or even 6-figure grand prize. It is a 7-figure grand prize. $1 million in the FFPC Big Gorilla. $350 to enter that. 7 Bananas promo is live. We just had somebody won a free FFPC Best Ball Tournament entry for getting the 7 pick 2 times in a row. People are really winning when it comes to this. And then the early Rampage tournament going on right now. If you are one of the teams in the first 200 leagues we fill in the Big Gorilla, you're automatically entered into that early Rampage tournament. So check that out at myffpc.com. That early Rampage tournament featuring a $25,000 grand prize, 2 tournaments for the price of 1. Don't forget about the FFPC Baby Gorilla. For those of you watching this show that always wanted to play high stakes fantasy football, but thought the barrier to entry was just not something that you wanted to deal with, $125 to enter the Baby Gorilla. $100,000 grand prize, same exact format as the Big Gorilla. Get in while you can there and win $100,000. All those available at myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live, which we will go live again next Wednesday. I'll tell you what's going on with shows next week at the end of the show. I want to bring in my co-host for the night, sitting in for the definitive commissioner of fantasy football. Who better to get than one person who has won 7, count them 7, FFPC league titles all over the place. Best Ball, Main Event, Fantasy Pros, Big Gorilla, what have you. He's done it all, and he's here joining me tonight to talk about some of those players I talked about at the top of the show, maybe some others as we get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Scott Hoyt rejoining the show tonight. Scott, good evening and welcome. The pride of South Carolina. How are you?
Balky, great to see you. I haven't talked to you in a while, and thanks for having me on.
It's good to have you. Are you wearing a Chicago Bears hat tonight on my show? What the hell?
Only for you. I knew you were I was going to be the first thing that was going to come out of your mouth. That's why I wore it, my friend.
Refresh my memory. Are you a Bears fan? Have you lived in Illinois? This is like your team?
I was born and raised in Chicago.
Okay.
And moved west when I was a senior in high school to Arizona, but always kept the Chicago roots. Cubs, Bears, Blackhawks. Wasn't a Bulls fan. That's a story for another day, but only because I went to college at ASU. A very good friend of mine was the ticket manager and always got me free tickets to go see the Suns.
Oh, okay.
So I became a Suns fan. And that was before Jordan. So, the Bulls sucked before by the time I went. So
I'm trying to think who was on this. Was this Kevin Johnson and Tom Chambers?
Chambers, Alvin Adams, Kevin Johnson.
Yeah.
You name it. It was a lot of fun watching them free.
I was always when I was growing up, I collected basketball. It's so funny. I was bringing this up. I can't remember who I was talking with a couple weeks ago on this show, where both of us collected sports cards, baseball cards, football cards, basketball cards. And then we both kind of gave it up at the same time because we started playing fantasy sports. And like the sports card collecting, I kind of lost its luster. And then we were collecting stats and building up our own teams. It was sort of weird how that happened. I have to ask you about your Chicago Bears, though, because what a time to be a Bears fan with Caleb Williams ushering in this new era of Bears football. No DJ Moore anymore. He's in Buffalo, but my God, the end of the season that Loveland and Burden have. Rome Odunze, by the way, who could have been just as good, but he was dealing with that foot injury. It seems like the Bears are coming into their peak of their powers, and you have a pretty talented head coach in Ben Johnson coaching these guys. Not only are the Bears looking good to be a Super Bowl threat in 2026, man, there's a lot of fantasy goodness on that team as well, Scott.
Yeah, and I think you already hit the nail on the head. It's called Ben Johnson. Mm-hmm. I think when Ben Johnson came on board last year, that really resonated with the fan base because, trust me, the previous regimes there held no confidence in any of the fans, and it showed on the field.
Yeah.
And so Ben Johnson really brought that culture to a different level. I think we had a great draft last year. You had Loveland, Burden, the year before. And you said Odunze was a great draft pick 2 years ago, and he played hurt all last year.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of give him a pass on that. And, and Benaga, he outperformed any draft status you could even imagine. I don't think he was even drafted in any of the regular season drafts, maybe in a best ball here or there. The guy was never drafted, and look where he is. So, yeah, it's fun. It's exciting to watch. Let's hope that they continue to progress. I think the biggest fantasy mover on that team is Loveland. If you take McBride and Bowers off the sheets, I think Loveland comes to the top of that heap.
I was going to ask you, like he's being drafted as tight end 3 right now. It sounds like a price you're willing to pay.
Yeah, I'm willing to pay that Isaiah Likely price. I sure am.
Don't worry, we'll get into him.
There's no doubt in my mind we're going to talk about that.
But, regarding Loveland, I think it's interesting because if you look at what he was able to – so he came in last season hurt, obviously, Scott, and it took a little bit – anytime you come into a season hurt, whether you're a rookie or a veteran, it takes you a while to kind of get into the flow of things. And when you're a rookie, it's even harder. But when you look at what he was able to accomplish, and I think the breakout game – was that Cincinnati game. I remember I was at a brewery in Green Bay. I was at the Packers game that day. And I think, don't quote me on this, I think that was the game that they lost to the Panthers. And that was the game Tucker Kraft tore his ACL. So I was already in a bad mood. And then I was at this brewery sort of drowning my sorrows. And I watched the tail end of this Bears-Bengals game. And I'm like, my God, this Colston Loveland, is this just a one-off? 7 catches for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dude failed to catch fewer than 4 passes the rest of the season. 4 passes was his minimum. The rest of the way tallied well over 20 yards. I think most of the games he was over 40. And then you look at the last couple of games of the season, 6 for 94 and a touchdown, 10 for 91 and a touchdown. You saw what he did to the Packers in the playoffs, where he crushed it that game as well. Normally, I try not to get super excited based on recency bias and what happened at the end of a season. But when you consider draft pedigree, that this guy was a slow starter because of injury, and the fact that he was a rookie, man, maybe things are just clicking, and this guy is going to be a stud in the NFL. I'm super excited to have him on a bunch of my dynasty teams. I've drafted him already a bunch this season. I hope I don't feel buyer's remorse, Scott, but based on what you're saying with Loveland, I shouldn't feel any buyer's remorse, and anybody that's drafting him as the tight end 3 should be very, very happy at what's going to happen this season.
Yeah, I kind of think that he's going to kind of take that whole McBride leap that McBride did in year 2. He's got the quarterback, he's got the pedigree. What's interesting about Loveland, people maybe do or don't remember, is when he was drafted by the Bears, a lot of draft experts had Tyler Warren going to the Bears and not Loveland. And I kept saying to my buddies, Loveland is a better prospect for that Bears offense than Ben Johnson. And sure enough, that's exactly how it panned out. And there were some Bear fans that weren't really all that thrilled about Loveland. They wanted Warren. And I think the rest is history here. And I think I will draft him wherever I can this year.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I remember when I was drafting in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, Farrell puts on the big Super Sunday draft extravaganza in Louisville on Saturday and Sunday of Super Bowl weekend. And I feel like I think I drafted like 7 or 8 teams that weekend. I bet I got Loveland at 5 of them. And it wasn't like I was trying to. Like, it just, he kept falling and falling. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to take Loveland. And I was fine with not paying up for McBride or Bowers. But when Loveland's available in like the 5th or 6th round, again, that's non-tight end premium scoring. But when he's available in the 5th or 6th round, I'm like, okay, I got to take advantage here. And I think he gives you a similar advantage, not the same, but I think he gives you a similar advantage over your opponent on a week-to-week basis that like what McBride gives you. What Bowers,
I would imagine Mojo's got them pretty high.
Yeah,
third round.
In fact, that's a great point. I'm going to look that up right now. And by the way, fantasymojo.com, at FantasyMojo on X. Darren Armani is the godfather of the Pros versus Joes Championship that we put on every year at the FFPC. He puts the whole thing together, and he has a great website. If you're playing in the FFPC, highly recommend you get a subscription to Fantasy Mojo. Right now, in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, Scott, I'm looking over the last week and a half. I see McBride as tight end 1 at 108. I see Bowers as tight end 2 at the 110. So basically back-to-back in the first round. But you can get Loveland. He's fallen a little bit now. Tight end 3, he goes at the 302, which is very compelling to me, because if you are drafting in the FFPC, you could ostensibly start your draft with either Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs. And then at that 2-3 turn, you could get a guy like London or Neighbors, at wide receiver, and still get Loveland in the 3rd round. A tremendous way to start your
and that would be a dream first pick right there.
Not only is it a dream, Scott, it's like this is average. Like an average start. That's what you could get right now with Loveland. I'm curious, not that I want to keep talking Bears here, but you said,
why do you want to talk Bears?
I know. Well, listen, I'm a fantasy guy too, so I love talking about great fantasy assets.
I have a great story about that too. We got to get to that one.
Okay, about Loveland?
No, about me being a Bears fan, you being a Packer fan.
Okay, we will get to that shortly. In fact, we'll get to it next. I just want to bring this up real quick. You mentioned that you thought Loveland would be a better fit for the Bears offense than Tyler Warren. What led you to that? Why do you think that he is better for the Bears than what Tyler Warren could do for them?
So I guess I just used Ben Johnson's offensive schemes that he held in Detroit, and you saw what Laporta did.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, Ben Johnson's going to put Loveland in that kind of – he's going to put him in a Laporta spot. And I really felt like Tyler Warren was kind of the gadget guy. He did all kinds of things, would be kind of cool. But I think Loveland was a true pass-receiving tight end. And that's what Ben Johnson loves. And so that's why I just thought from a success perspective, Loveland had a little bit more upside. That doesn't mean that Warren wouldn't have been a good pick. I just felt like Loveland had a little bit more upside. That's all.
Yeah, and certainly it was funny seeing people victory lap Tyler Warren earlier in the season, and now we're seeing everybody victory lap Colston Loveland. Like that they got it right. And listen, it's a brand new season. These are both young guys. We'll see what happens. I do want to talk about the Bears versus Packers fandom here with you, Scott.
Well, here's a funny story. And because I said to you, why do you want to talk about Bears? And you said, well, I'm a fantasy guy, and I get that better than anybody. I will never forget this. It's probably 4 years ago. I'm walking out of the FFPC draft in Vegas, and you and Howard Bender were interviewing people.
Yeah.
And you asked me to come over and talk about my draft, and I sit down with you guys, and I'm wearing Bears gear everywhere. I'm a Bears guy.
Yeah.
And Howard Bender looks at me and he says, "You're a Bears fan, right?" He said, "Yeah." Then why is the first 5 picks Packers, Vikings, and Lions? I said, because I draft with my head, not with my heart.
Yeah. And like sometimes I think there is a sick enjoyment for me doing that, like where like, listen, I wasn't really all that thrilled that the Bears beat the Packers in the playoffs, but it did help me, having having Loveland, in playoff contests or whatever. So I think it's like, it's important to have our fandom, but it's also important to be, drafting the right players too, which is quite frankly, I mean, you think about all these, not that I want to single out the Cleveland Browns fans over the years, Scott, but what have they had to root for over the last 20 or 30 years? And then you bring fantasy football into the equation. All of a sudden it's like a brand new love affair with the NFL, where even if your team's not doing that great, your team could be doing that great in fantasy.
Well, and 4 years ago when I went, or 4 or 5 years ago when I did that interview with you guys, the Bears did not have anybody that was fantasy worthy. It just wasn't. That was kind of a deathbed of fantasy players there.
Before we move off of the Bears, Odunze, he was crushing it at the start of last season, and then he had the foot injury. And you mentioned it. He played through it through the rest of the season, maybe to the Bears' detriment that he was out there. Your thoughts on how he fits into the 2026 Bears when so many people are on Burden and Loveland this year?
Well, and I think you said it all. If you look at the tape in the beginning of last year and you look at some of the tape from the end of his rookie year, you see the upside there. He played hurt all year. After those first couple games, he played hurt, and they could have easily shut him down for the season, but he kind of gutted it out. And with DJ Moore now gone, I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity for Dunze to play that lead role. Burden is electric, no doubt about it. But I think Dunze is going to be if you look at what he did at Washington, he was a great possession receiver. And I really believe that the Bears will take Dunze and put him in a DJ Moore type of role. I really do.
Oh, okay. All right. I've been saying this too. I think, with as much as it may sting to some Bears fans losing DJ Moore, I think he's going to be so much better in Buffalo with Josh Allen.
He will.
Rather than this offense that Ben Johnson has with Caleb Williams in Chicago. I think that Johnson, while everybody says he handpicked these guys. Well, Ryan Poles is the guy who handpicked these guys, but Ben Johnson definitely had some input on it. Yeah. And I think with the addition of Loveland and Burden, Cecil Lammy from Football Guys always says this, the secret around the NFL is fit. It's all about fit. And these guys just happen to fit Ben Johnson's offense much more so than DJ Moore. And oh, by the way, DJ Moore probably fits Joe Brady's offense with Josh Allen in Buffalo better than he did in Chicago.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you watched all the Packer games. I watched all the Bears games. There was something missing between DJ Moore and Caleb Williams.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. You could just tell at times that DJ Moore, the chemistry just wasn't there. And yeah, he had a couple of great games. I'm sure you'll remember the game that he beat the Packers on and all that stuff. But nonetheless, I just felt like something was amiss. And so when this Moore trade came about, didn't surprise me one bit. That had been rumored for a while. Yeah. And you're right. He fits in a great spot. I think fantasy football, as you know, is a very situational. Where you put a guy, and if he's in the right situation, he could or could not thrive.
Scott, who screwed up that last play against the Rams? Was that a Caleb Williams thing, or is that a DJ Moore thing in the playoffs?
Well, I don't think anyone's going to admit it, but I think it was a Caleb Williams thing.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't think, I think DJ Moore felt like he might have contributed to that rumor that it was Caleb's fault, and I think that's what kind of put the final nail in that coffin. I think.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's a better thing for all parties considered going forward here. And listen, if it's a Bills-Bears Super Bowl this year, sign me up for that storyline.
Oh, come on. There's no way.
Listen, like stranger things have happened. And I think that Scott, I don't think I think there's plenty of people out there that would be more shocked if the Bills made the Super Bowl rather than the Bears this year. I'm just reporting what I'm hearing. Let's get into some emails here tonight from some viewers of the show that want to pick your brain. We go to Marty in Lansing, Michigan. First off tonight, he writes, Scott, how concerned are you about Malik Willis not having any playmakers to throw to this season? Thank you, Marty in Lansing, Michigan. Marty, I don't know why he's not concerning himself with the Lions. He's talking about the Dolphins here. I think, and I'll let you weigh in on this, the Dolphins receiving and pass catching room is going to look radically different in a couple of weeks after the draft. And quite frankly, maybe even like a week after the draft, where they could sign some of these players without, wide receivers, without figuring into the compensatory formula that they would had they signed them before the draft. So my level of concern with Willis right now is not like, I'm more concerned whether he can do this over a 17-game season and keep not necessarily what he was doing in Green Bay in those short kind of small sample sizes or whatever. My bigger concern is whether he can keep up being a fantasy contributor over the course of an entire NFL season. I'm less concerned with the playmakers because he's still going to have Achane, and we could see them draft the tight. We could see them draft Sadiq. Them sign Njoku. We could see them sign Diggs or Jennings. We could see them draft Tyson or Lemon, and probably more than one of those happens. And all of a sudden, it's not looking all that bad for Malik Willis in Miami. If we look at the mojo on him right now in the never too early FFPC Best Ball Tournament, Malik Willis is currently going as quarterback 21 at the 11:06. Scott, I think that's a good buy right now.
I would tell you my first gut reaction is, yeah, that is a good buy, because I think if you look at Willis and really the dialogue behind Willis, it's probably the most volatile in terms of player now, volatile and heavily situation driven because of what you just described with his offense. If he has the weapons and if they get an offensive line, I think he will perform well. But what makes I think the value is and our league loves the dual threat quarterbacks. And he displayed that. He's as fast as they are. He's kind of describe him as a Lamar Jackson light. Mm-hmm. It kind of feels that way. At least that's what he demonstrated those few games when he played in place of Love last year.
Right.
But then I go back to the whole ceiling floor conversation, and the ceiling is very high. If he hits the ceiling, he'll be in the top 10. He'll be a top 10 quarterback this year. Fancy. No doubt in my mind. But he could hit that floor based on potentially what we just talked about. Can he get the weapons? Will he get the weapons? And was his 2 or 3 week rise going to be 17-game worthy in 2026? And I think there's enough history to suggest that quarterbacks who have a 2 or 3 or 4 game run and sign a big contract, and I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but I don't remember them being that wildly successful. I really just don't. I mean, I was going to kind of do some homework about that today. I thought about that, but I know just anecdotally, I think that's true. But listen, I like Willis. I like what he offers, the dual threat. And, if you take the assumptions of where his ceiling and his floor go, I think he's probably realistically a QB 10 or 11, maybe 12. But if he does it, he hits a home run, he easily be in the top 7 or 8. Easily.
The Matt LaFleur aspect, I think LaFleur was instrumental in taking him to another level when it comes to how good he was as far as production goes at the quarterback position. I think that can't be underrated. And now he goes to Miami, where he's going to have Bobby Slowick as his offensive coordinator with a head coach with a defensive background in Jeff Hafley. That's mildly concerning as well. I think so the two things I really like about Willis, his legs and what he was able to do on the ground. And two, you are not drafting him as a top 10 quarterback, which is fantastic. You're drafting him outside of the top 20 right now. Yeah, I know in best ball, you can't make adjustments to your roster or whatever, but even still taking Malik Willis in the 11th round as quarterback 21, you can, that could be a partial miss and you could still win a lot of leagues doing that. And that's assuming he misses, right? If he hits, mother of God. Now we're talking, like you said, top 10, maybe even a top 5 season with him in Miami. And I'm not saying that's likely, but it is within the range of possibilities. So,
well, I think you'd have to have the perfect storm for him to become that top 5 quarterback.
And honestly, if you're drafting for a $40,000 grand prize in the Never Too Early tournament prior to the NFL draft, you are looking for that perfect storm, right? And if it hits with Willis, great. But if what are the ship chasing guys always say? Big hit, small miss, right? And I think his ADP, as it stands at the moment, and I don't think it changes until after the NFL draft.
Yeah, exactly.
His ADP in the 11th round, that would be a big hit, small miss for me, which is why I'd be willing to invest.
Yeah, and that's why I always kind of couch these comments, especially right before the draft, is that the draft will then adjust.
Yeah.
ADPs for a lot of these players. And then once the draft is over with, then some of these free agents that are still out there, like the Njokus and the Diggs, they'll find a home based on what teams did or didn't do in the draft. And so this will all become pretty fluid once we get into late April, early May. And I'm guessing that they will surround him with and take advantage of his mobility, but surround him with some talent. If that's the case, that value that you talked about in the 11th round, I believe probably goes up a little bit.
Significantly.
Today, I'd be comfortable if I was on just a season fantasy league. I'd be very comfortable with him as my QB2 all day long.
John Eric Sullivan said that, and maybe this is GM speak, I don't know, but he talked about this is not just like a placeholder type thing. Like they're investing in him like for a significant long-term guy. That's how they view him. Wow. You cannot sign Willis to that deal and say that about him. If you're not being disingenuous, you have to be able to surround him with some talent.
You do, and you better. And I'm not overly concerned about the whole HN thing because that's not a big deal today. Right. But does that rear its ugly head? And frankly, is HN in his head thinking, wow, Willis is a mobile quarterback, Tua was not. Does that take away some of my production as a running back?
Yeah.
So that could be part of that. I don't know.
And you think about what Jeff Hafley and Sullivan said, too, about how they want to be bigger and stronger in December, going up to play the Jets, the Patriots, and the Bills up north in these cold weather games in December where fast might get slow, but big doesn't get small. Yeah. And you have this big bruising Ollie Gordon in the backfield as well. I wonder if Achan's looking at that like saying, yeah, I know that they said I'm one of the pillars they want to build around, but what's actually going to happen when the real bullets start flying and we have a mobile quarterback that's more likely to use his legs than dump off to me? What's going to happen when they want to really establish the run and pound it between the tackles to keep these games close when they have a guy like Ollie Gordon on the team? So there are some questions with Achan, and maybe that's a question that we should be answering too when it comes to drafting these players like Achan as early as we have to draft them, because when the money weeks roll around, Scott, I don't know how significant Achan is going to be involved in meaningful fantasy production week 15, week 16. Week 17.
I think it would be hard for him to replicate last year. And there's two reasons for that. One is the uncertainty we just talked about with Willis taking some of that away from him and his kind of what his contract situation is. I think this is his last year of his rookie deal. Yep. So that's number one. Number two is I believe that last year was the first time that he's actually played a full season, all 17 games without getting hurt. I mean, the guy does have a little bit of injury history, but for his size, he's been pretty damn durable.
Yeah.
I give him that. But if I recall, I think this might have been the first year. I might be wrong on that one, but I'm thinking that I didn't draft a lot of HN last year because of injury. That was my biggest concern. So, and we don't want to talk about last year. I'm just glad that the calendar's turned.
Right.
Eric, I've told this to so many people over the last 6 months. 2025 collectively, and you know me, I'm in a lot of leagues. Collectively was my worst year in memory. I don't know, and I can attribute to a couple things. I really can, and it was poor drafting at the top. I faded Puka because of Stafford.
Yeah.
I didn't know what Stafford was going to play. I faded badly JSN because, I mean, he's the only guy there. You got Darnold playing the quarterback. Was that really going to happen? So, yeah, I think those two players alone caused me to pivot to other areas that probably wasn't a smart move. Anyway,
well, to stick up for you, Scott, you weren't the only one.
I know.
I did not draft Nakua in a lot of spots because I was also afraid of Stafford's back. I mean, how often have we seen a quarterback of Stafford's age that has had back issues? Not just this past year, like it's been going on for several years now. How often does it happen where that guy is able to be out there the majority of games throwing to a player, and Nakua, who's had his own injury issues over the course of his career? So I'm totally with you on the Nakua thing. JSN, I mean, the fact that this dude was going in the third round, fourth round, whatever it was, I think we can just say that was a collective miss by us.
Well, I mean, who had that? Who had JSN being the top receiver on their Bengals?
No one did.
Not many people. I mean, I just don't think that. But again, I mean, those are just two situations. And then injuries. Injuries always can derail a season. And frankly, I wasn't as focused this year managing my teams like I did because, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, about my new business that I've got created. That kind of took some of my focus away. But that's okay. I'm back. It's back.
I think the other thing too, like I had a season like that, Scott. I can't remember how many years ago it was. It was probably like six or seven years ago, where I did nothing in my leagues. Like I didn't win any of them. I hardly made the playoffs in any of them. Like it was probably my worst season ever in fantasy football. And after that year, like in December rolled around, I'm like, I'm out. Like I'm done with this. I'm not playing anymore. I'll do the podcast or whatever and talk fantasy. I'll interview people like you that are still good at it. I was just out. And that feeling lasted a good month and a half, maybe.
Really?
Yeah. And then when February rolled around, like late February, I'm like, I started getting, it was a bad year. Everybody has bad years. I'm going to chalk it up. I always bring up, there was a year where, and eventually IFC played that year. But there was a year Chad Schroeder had, and anybody who's watching this knows who Chad is, arguably the world's greatest season-long fantasy football player.
He's the best. He's the best.
He had a year where he heavily invested in Todd Gurley. And this was the year that Gurley, I think he got hurt or he underwhelmed or something to that extent. And Chad didn't have a great year. And by the way, his not having a great year is still a pretty good year. But he did not have a great year to his standards. And what I thought was so fascinating for a guy who invests the kind of capital he does in playing, the following year, not only was he drafting just as many teams, Scott, he went right back to the Todd Gurley well. How many times have you heard players say, I'm never drafting that guy again. He will never be. Chad not only drafted the same number of teams, maybe more, but he drafted Gurley on just as many teams. Like he was not shying away from it. And you know what happened that year? Gurley crushed it, and so did Chad. So I think there is something to be said about, just remembering what we did wrong in a previous year, but ending it and not playing anymore, I don't think is the answer. When we enjoy this hobby so much. And Chad turned it into a very profitable year where many casual people who play in office leagues or family leagues or friend leagues or whatever, where they would have not touched Todd Gurley with a 10-foot pole. Chad was drafting him wherever he could, and it ended up working out great. It's a week by week game that we play in fantasy, but it's also a year by year game too.
Well, I mean, as you know, fantasy sports and fantasy football being the dominant of all those, to me, it's now 365.
Yeah.
It is no longer a seasonal thing. As you know, drafts they start soon after the Super Bowls ended. And especially with Dynasty the way that it is, and it has become really the only fantasy sport that really, I think, shows up really year round. And the NFL's done a great job of really promoting this league the way they have. And I think the fan experience has been tremendous. So, I mean, as you know, I've been playing fantasy football since 1989. I was part of the fax generation. That's what I call it. I had to fax it in on Friday night, and I couldn't make any changes after Friday night. So you know how that goes.
I love that we have the greatest generation, the baby boomers, and then the fax generation prior to Gen X and what have you.
Thank God for the internet. Thank God for the internet.
Well, thank God for the internet. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to read this next email we have from John in Jacksonville, Florida. He writes, Scott, how much is Jonathan Brooks going to eat into Chuba Hubbard's opportunities in 2026? John, we appreciate the email. Scott, Brooks has been sort of like this quiet asset in the Carolina backfield the last couple of years. Obviously, injuries have kept him off the field. But Rico Dowdle's in Pittsburgh. I mean, it's Hubbard, it's Trevor Etienne, and it's Jonathan Brooks. How much are you buying into this little bit of hype that Brooks has been getting? You know, kind of. I don't want to say it's crescendoing, but it's definitely getting louder.
Yeah, in fact, I heard something this morning on my drive to Starbucks. I was listening. I can't remember who I was listening to on the fantasy show, and they were talking about that Jonathan Brooks is getting hyped up in Carolina because I live in South Carolina, so we get a lot of the Panthers stuff here, and that tells me one of two things. That tells me that that's good news if Brooks is actually doing well because he's had 2 horrible years.
Yep.
And he's a talent, but the fact that you let Rico Dowdle walk to the Steelers tells me that they have some faith that Brooks is fully healthy and ready to contribute, because in my opinion, they lost, meaning the Panthers, I felt lost a little bit of confidence in Chuba Hubbard last year. And maybe that was because Rico Dowdle showed up and Chuba didn't. And so if you got a backfield of Chuba, Jonathan Brooks, and Trevor Etienne, I don't know where that goes. I really don't. I don't have a ton of confidence in that backfield right now because of Jonathan Brooks. I think he's the X factor.
Yeah, he is the X factor, 100%. When it comes to that, and I think both of them. I'm going to look at the mojo on them right now. If you look at what it costs to draft a Carolina Panthers running back right now, knowing this sort of nebulous situation we're in, Hubbard is running back 28 at the 6'10. Jonathan Brooks running back 47 in the 13th round. I'd be much more willing to draft. I mean, this goes without saying. I'd be much more willing to draft Brooks over Chuba Hubbard at that point. But Hubbard's not necessarily totally off my board, Scott.
Well, yeah, no, and I think if his value drops and Brooks is rises, then you have to say, oh, wait a minute, Hubbard might still be a pretty good value.
Right.
We played that game 2 years ago and burned a lot of people. That nobody was drafting Hubbard. And look what he did 2 years ago. If Hubbard can show what he did in 2024 and 2026. That's a completely different story. But something tells me that the Panthers feel like Brooks is healthy. And I'm sensing that. And so I think that's where that value is coming in. We'll see. Again, let's see what happens at the draft. Let's see what happens at the draft. Do they draft a running back? I don't think they will. I think I think they could, one of those teams that could draft best available. I mean, you talk about Sadiq landing spot. That could be a pretty good spot for that.
I absolutely love that.
I do too.
If that happens, for sure.
Yeah.
The Carolina Panthers offense, I think, is going to get very, very interesting, regardless of if it's Sadiq or whoever, because I think when it comes down to it, they are going to get a difference maker, whether it's round 1, round 2, round 3. They're going to get a difference maker that's ready to contribute from day one on that offense. And I think that's going to help Teteroa McMillan. It's going to help that backfield as well. And if it's Sadiq, yeah, wheels up. And by the way, like, I know everybody's kind of written off Jatavian Sanders. I'd be excited to see what the Panthers can do with Sadiq and Jatavian Sanders on the field, especially the way the NFL's trending right now. I think that'd be very compelling for fantasy football for sure.
Yeah, I think if you recall last year, Sanders was a hot pick, and certainly in best ball, he was going pretty. I mean, there's some great value there, and I think there's a lot of talent. I think the other player in the Panthers that I think is going to have a good year,
Coker.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And by the way, I think McMillan is a stud.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if Bryce Young could continue his progression, Panthers could have a good offense. They really could.
And in that division too,
exactly right.
Tampa and New Orleans and and Atlanta, I think they can do numbers there for sure.
Let's see what the draft produces, and then we can have that conversation again.
Yeah, but I'm with you on McMillan. Our Wednesday night guest on HSFFO, Jeff Jameson. I think it was his most owned player was Teteroa McMillan, and I didn't ask him about him because I don't know what question we can craft about Teteroa McMillan right now. Yeah, he's awesome, and yeah, he's on the upswing. Like he's a player you want to be in business with right now, and certainly regardless of what the draft brings, it's not going to hurt McMillan. It can only help him going forward.
I like their offense. I like what they're doing.
Yeah. I want to go to Ken in Englewood, Colorado. What's up, fellas? Are you buying into Michael Wilson's big finish last season? I appreciate you. Ken in Englewood, Colorado, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for emailing in. Wilson's a guy I'm not, and Scott, maybe you'll have a different thought on this. I'm not buying into him necessarily all that much. And I have several reasons. Number one, I don't think what Arizona did last season is going to be replicated this year. Seemingly, when I watched Red Zone on Sunday, it was like right after, they show all the kickoffs or whatever. And then seemingly the Cardinals would be down 14-0 5 minutes later, or 17-0 in the first quarter. It was crazy. And Arizona had a historic high passing volume last season. And I think Wilson was a big beneficiary of that. In fact, we saw him pick up steam when Arizona really started getting battered in that backfield where they're down to like running back 4, running back 5 as their starter. That's when we saw Wilson really turn it up. And then they were missing some guys, some pass catchers on that offense as well. I don't think that continues. I still have not written off Marvin Harrison. I just drafted him in a league yesterday. Where I still think there's plenty of meat on the bone there. I think Wilson's going to take a step forward. Beg your pardon, Harrison is going to take a step forward. And you still have Trey McBride on that offense. When you look at what you have to invest into Michael Wilson right now in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, Michael Wilson is costing you an early 8th round pick. He's wide receiver 38 right now. I feel like that's too high. I understand, having the big end of the 2025 season probably means good things for him. That's not always the case. And I think this is one of the cases where I'm probably letting somebody else draft Michael Wilson this year. I'm not as high on him as consensus. Yeah.
And you and I think absolutely alike on this one. I think there's going to be a bit of an overreaction on Michael Wilson this year because of what he showed in the second half of last year. And again, I think the dynamics of that you already pointed out is Marvin Harrison Jr. This is year 3. He's got to either show up or
right.
Go out. And I think he's got the pedigree to show up. Now you got a new coach in there, and Mike LaFleur. So let's see if he can bring in some different dynamics there. The only way that Wilson could even come close to replicating those stats is that he's got a major role and shares volume. And the key piece is, does he share volume? Well, you just said it. You got McBride. You got Marvin Harrison Jr. You now got James Conner coming back. You got Algier in that backfield. I don't know if Wilson can share that volume to be able to substantiate what he did last year, or at least that carryover. I think if he's a ceiling guy or a floor guy, I think I'm closer to somewhere in the middle of that. I don't see him as a ceiling guy this year. I don't see him as a floor guy either. I mean, I think, could he get – I'm looking at maybe 60, 65 catches, maybe 750 and 4 to 5 touchdowns. Well, that doesn't I think he did that in the last 6 games of the year.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm with you. I'm with you on this one, Balky. I don't know if I trust Wilson doing that again, given their situation. You got a new head coach, new offensive coordinator. What does that bring? And Marvin Harrison's got to show up. He's got to show up.
I mean, I'm still believing in the pedigree. Maybe
you have to. You have
to
to.
my own fault, but I still believe in the pedigree of Harrison. And how many years did it take for Wilson to break out? That's the other thing I didn't bring up too. Like, he's had ample opportunities over the course of his career. And then when all this perfect storm kind of stuff emerged, that's when Wilson broke out. I think that's kind of like a fake breakout, or a fake out, as it were. When it comes to Wilson. So, and I could be wrong on that. We could be wrong on this. I'm willing to be wrong on this.
Yeah, I am too. And it's funny because last year was a horrible year for me, but a couple of the best ball leagues that I did well in, I drafted Michael Wilson in the 20th round in a best ball light with no kickers and defenses.
Right.
So,
which made sense for that ADP for that draft. It made perfect sense.
And by the way, I want to. You promoted Fantasy Mojo. I got to tell your audience again, if you're playing FFPC and you're not getting the Fantasy Mojo, you're making a wrong decision.
Yeah.
Get all over that. I love that. In fact, one of my leagues at FFPC last year, I drafted against him.
How did you do?
Actually, I beat him. I did beat him. Neither one of us did well. So, but it's funny because he was 2 spots away from me in the draft. I think he was drafting 4. I was drafting 6. I knew exactly where he was going.
Right, exactly. Yes, yeah.
I knew if he's drinking his own Kool-Aid, I knew what he was going to do. So it was fun. He's a good guy. As you know, he's great.
Yeah, super nice guy. I hang out with him in Kentucky and Las Vegas every single year. And I will say this too. And Darren, he always pumps up his website as like a preseason website. And I always kind of like call him out on that, especially on the show. Like, he does so much stuff in season as well. With all the bidding, you get to see where players are going and everything like that, keeping track of everything that's going on throughout the season. It truly is a tool that spans over the course of 12 months. Like, you really get a lot of.
Yeah, I love the tool. It's worth every penny you ever would have to pay for that.
Yeah, and he doesn't charge enough. He actually,
you're right. He doesn't.
4 or 5 years ago, like I think like multiple people told him, like, you really should be charging more for what you're doing. And then he finally did. He charged more, and it's still super affordable, for a membership there.
I love it. I love it. So anyway, I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know he appreciates it. I definitely appreciate it as well. And Scott, we can't get away with.
I know where you're going with this, Balky.
Exactly. This is an email. I don't know if Kurt plays live in Las Vegas with FFPC, but he writes, "Hey guys, can you ask Scott how he feels about Isaiah Likely now that he's a Giant?" That is Kurt in Las Vegas. Kurt, thank you so much. Scott, we had you on the show. Was this week 2 of the
week 3? Week 3. Yeah.
Okay. And you had drafted this. Were these drafts live in Las Vegas, or were you online when you were drafting?
I was live. I was there.
Live. Okay, that's what I thought. And you took Likely after the opening Thursday night game.
I did.
Likely had a big game, and he led you to how were you leading the main event?
I was.
You were leading the main event after week 2, and that was a huge part of why that was because of Isaiah Likely's early performance. And obviously we know how that season turned out, but you came on the show week 3, and I felt gave a really solid, passionate defense of why this was not just a 1-week pick. This was a pick that you believed was going to pay dividends over the course of the season. Now, it ultimately it did not, but you sold me on it, man. Like, I was like, Christ, I should have had Likely on more of my teams after I talked with you. New situation this year. No more Mark Andrews, still John Harbaugh, but now they're in New York together with Jackson Dart, Malik Neighbors, so on and so forth. How do you feel about Likely now, knowing that you like the player, divorce yourself from the situation that he was in a couple of years ago. I know you like the player, and now this player is free of Mark Andrews and in New York.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to that situation just for a second. I mean, I drafted him in the 4th round, and he was, that was based on his performance that Thursday night, I thought it was a great pick because now he's going to be my tight end one throughout the remainder of the year. And even if he comes close to producing somewhat near that, it's going to be a productive year at the tight end spot for me. But we all know how that all panned out, and lessons learned, I think, a little bit. But the player is there. The talent is there. And I think he lived in the Mark Andrews shadow. And what I find interesting is the fact that he lived in the Andrews shadow under John Harbaugh.
Right.
Now John Harbaugh brings him in, and John Harbaugh also has Theo Johnson. So does Likely play the lead role, or does he play a complementary role? Well, Theo Johnson's not Mark Andrews in his prime, not even close, even though people love Theo Johnson. So I do believe, again, I use that floor ceiling analysis. I do believe that Likely this year is closer to his ceiling than he is to his floor because he's not stuck behind Andrews anymore. I think he could be the number 2 target behind, Malik Neighbors, assuming that what the draft does, or does it do?
No Wan'Dale Robinson too, Scott. So
exactly. I mean, he's he's a wide receiver playing a tight end spot. We've seen him splash week after week. Now, that's the other piece that I don't have complete confidence yet in, is that he is very inconsistent, or at least he showed inconsistencies in Baltimore. So how does that make 2026 any different than his previous? Well, I think he was signed to be a featured tight end here. I think he's obviously going to jump to the top of that depth chart. I like Theo Johnson, but I think Theo's going to play a complementary part. And you got Jackson Dart, who I think can extend a play very similar to his buddy Lamar Jackson. So I think there's a lot of similarities there.
In regards to Likely, I will say too, Harbaugh, and maybe I'm reading too much between the lines. Maybe there's nothing here, but Baltimore extends Mark Andrews. Harbaugh leaves New York. And I'm not saying the reason he left Baltimore, he didn't leave New York. He left Baltimore to go to New York. And I'm not saying the reason that he left there was because they chose to put their chips on Andrews rather than Likely. But connect the dots, dude is no longer in Baltimore, and then the team that he is with goes out and signs Isaiah Likely. So I think there's something there in regards to that. I do think there's a lot to like about the way the NFL's trending with more of a focus on the tight end and the fact that Likely is stepping into a situation where, and we're just assuming Malik Neighbors full health, right? But if he gets off to a slow start, all of a sudden Likely could be the number 1 there. At least temporarily. And then, once you're the number 1, even when Neighbors comes back, he's going to figure heavily into that passing game. Likely right now, the ADP on him currently in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, I'm looking at Likely as tight end 16 at the 10:03. He has moved up, Scott. So he's moved past Andrews. He's moved past Strange, Juwan Johnson. And certainly we could see him move past Dallas Goedert. I don't know. I mean, it'll depend upon landing spot with Sadiq. If he can move past Sadiq, I could see him moving past Travis Kelce as well. George Kittle, especially if we get reports on him not trending all that well coming off the torn Achilles. Dalton Kincaid, we already heard from I think it was Joe Brady that they're already having to manage his knee. In March, they're coming out saying they got to manage his knee throughout the season. I don't think he surpasses Jake Ferguson, but I definitely see a universe where this dude is drafted as a tight end 1, as like a top 11, top 12 tight end, where you have to soak a 7th round pick into him. And right now, the getting's good, unlikely. If you can acquire him in the 10th round, I think you're doing things the right way.
Well, if I could get him as tight end 16 right now, I'll take that all day long, because I really do believe in the talent. And again, fantasy football is all about situation. I think he's in a great situation. Going back to the Mark Andrews thing, when that deal got announced, that 3-year deal got announced, I looked at myself and said, what are they doing?
Exactly. Yeah, I think we all were.
That was the end of – I knew that was the end of Likely at that point. That was done. And then I'm thinking, okay, please, Likely, go somewhere where the situation is good. And I don't think he could have found a better situation than he's found. So, again, I'm gonna stay positive on my boy Likely. My bold prediction on Likely, he's gonna finish as a in the top 10, maybe 8 or 9. I think he can get you 6 to 9 TDs. I think he can get you 110 targets. I think he can get you 70, 80 catches. That's probably his ceiling.
Yeah.
And I think all things have to click, that perfect storm again. But I think he's got the capability of doing that.
I would be mildly surprised if he did that. I certainly would not be shocked at
No,
all.
I know. Well, I have some redemption. This is a redemption tool.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to draft him back on. I'm not going to draft him in the 4th round. I can assure you that. If I do, if you see me do that in Vegas live, pull me out of my chair and send me down to my room.
Do we know, are the Ravens playing in week 1? Like, I know they're doing a Wednesday game this year.
You mean the Giants?
Okay. Or the Giants. Yeah, the Giants. I guess we don't know but if he ends up going 8 for 90 and a touchdown.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is that it's kind of a bummer. We got Thursday night game is now Wednesday night game.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a Friday night game, or no, I think that Friday now is Thursday.
It's Thursday. Yes, exactly. 100%.
So there's no Friday game.
No Friday game. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What else is wild is your ascent into the fantasy football industry. Not only are you heading up fantasy sports strategies right now, Scott, but on the FSGA board. Congratulations to you, my friend. This is awesome stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you know what? If the truth be told, I have the FFPC to thank for a lot of this, frankly. My conversations that I've had with you and Dave and Alex over the years always gave me the passion for this industry to do something more than just drafting.
Right.
And I had retired from the corporate world 5 years ago and thought, what better place for me to kind of hang my hat on in this industry, but really didn't know where to go. And I just kind of poked around a little bit. And then I got I talked to Alex and David about the FSGA a little bit, and they were, they were happy with FSGA, but they didn't really think that there was a role there for me. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, let me check it out first. Maybe that's right. But I got involved with the FSGA, and after about a year, I realized that there was a void that I could fill, and that was to help really early stage startups, entrepreneurs who need maybe an extra lift or an extra help. And so that's where this small advisory group that I've put together, that's why it's called Fantasy Sports Strategies. I take my 35 plus executive years in management and marketing and kind of help these companies grow. And there's another tentacle of this, is you'll appreciate this, is I've started my own podcast series. Yes. And there's nothing easy about that. But I am having so much fun with it. And that's really what it's all about. Make it unique, make it fun. And I know you've agreed to come on as a guest. In fact, you're going to do a post NFL draft podcast with me. And the name of the podcast is called Under the Hoodie. And so if you think about the reason behind Under the Hoodie was, if you take the word hoodie and just say under the hood, that would denote that we're going to get a little bit detailed and hear about these stories in the industry of these companies and people, and just hear about the journeys and anything that people can learn from that journey. We want to tell that story. But the hoodie part is, anybody who knows me knows that 90% of the time I'm in a hoodie.
Yeah.
And so as a branding guy, I thought, well, what a great way to do this. So I said, and it's got so bulky, it's gotten so much attention, I actually had to call an attorney to get it trademarked. I was getting worried that people were everyone, oh, you better get that trademarked. Because you're right, I do. Anyway, I'm having a great time with it. We record once a week, and we talk to early stage companies, but we also talk to sports, certainly sports voices out there, and you being one of the most respected ones out there. I'm thrilled that you agreed to come on my show. So
yeah, I'm excited to do it for sure. And I think it's awesome what you're doing. We are in the golden age of fantasy sports. And I think there's so many people with good ideas out there over the last 10, 15, 20 years that just failed to flesh them out, or failed to really see how high they could have taken them, or how much they could have done with them. But what you're doing with fantasy sports strategies is really offering a lot of the tools and a lot of the know-how in order to, where people have failed before without sort of this service, you're making sure that they're not only succeeding but thriving.
Yeah, and that's really the whole premise behind why I started this, is that if I could help one or two companies go from here to here, then I've achieved what I want to do. Because what does it do? It grows the industry, and that's really what I'm all about. And I want this industry to grow, continue to grow. As you know, there's a lot of innovation going on. There's a lot of technology going on. There's a lot of changes going on in our industry, and a lot of moving parts. So you got to stay on top of all that. But I'm thrilled about being elected to the board. I've got my first board meeting tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited that I was actually elected to the board my first try. So that was pretty cool. Pretty happy about that.
And congratulations on that. That is awesome, for sure. If people who are watching this or listening to it have an idea, have something that they want to explore within the space, I think fantasysportsstrategies.com is just where to go. Connect with you on there, and obviously everybody needs to subscribe to the Under the Hoodie podcast anywhere.
Yes, please. It's we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Our handle is on X is FSS Strats, so Fantasy Sports Strats. And I'm always, as you know, I'm always up for a conversation on this industry. Always.
So much fun. It's like, talking about the ins and outs in strategy of winning, but strategy of creating something that is long lasting in the industry. Certainly, I'm all for it. It's exciting to see how many ideas. We have another generation coming up. It's weird because I used to be the younger generation, and now I think I've moved on from that. And now I'm seeing what the younger cats out there are doing and exploring, obviously with your help and making sure that they're making a lasting impact.
Well, you guys have impacted me a lot. You and Alex and David, and even Chris, for that matter.
Sure, absolutely.
I've kind of grown up with you guys, and if you recall, I joined you guys in 2008 after the WCOF went defunct.
Right.
And I've been with you guys ever since, and you guys know how I feel about you. And frankly, as far as podcasts, you've been kind of my role model of podcasts. I see what you do, and then I think in the back of my head is, he does this almost every day. There's no way I could do this every day.
But you've been doing. The thing is, like during the season, obviously it's a little bit more labor intensive.
Yeah.
But I think just and not that I want to turn it into this podcast advice show. But I just think doing something even once a week, as long as you get in the rhythm and the repetition and you're churning out new content or what have you, I just think that's the biggest thing. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the better you get at it, the ultimate thing that you want is audience engagement and people enjoying it. Right. And
I just did a master special yesterday.
Yeah.
We just recorded it and we just dropped it today. But Matt Korn, who is an FFPC guy as well. Matt Korn's a big player.
Yeah, and that is, and that's I'm just looking at Spotify right now. I'm seeing it available right now. So we're very, very cool. For sure. Keep up the great work with Under the Hoodie. Keep up the great work with Fantasy Sports Strategies, fantasysportsstrategies.com. And of course, sitting in on the FSGA board, that's going to be awesome as well. Good luck in that first meeting. I'm very excited when I see you in Las Vegas, that you can tell me all the ins and outs of the industry that I don't know about, that you'll be privy to now. This is very, very exciting. And I do also want to thank you too, Scott, for hopping aboard tonight and hanging out with me, talking some fantasy sports. This is living proof that Packers fans and Bears fans can come together in the name of fantasy sports and have a great time. Thank you so much, my friend.
Oh, you're welcome, Balk. It's always great talking to you.
You got it. We'll talk with you again soon. And don't be a stranger. I'm sure I'll see you in Vegas as well this year.
Are you going to be at the expo by any chance?
No, and people always ask me this. I get this question all the time. I never go to the expo because I am waist deep in commissioning FFPC drafts that time of year. And Bob Lung, who's been on my Insider Access show before several times, he always brings this up. And he told me last year, he's like, listen, the expo is going to be a little bit earlier in 2026, which I think it's late July, right?
It is. In fact, Under the Hoodie is sponsoring a panel.
Bravo. That's awesome.
And it's sponsoring a panel on redraft leagues.
Okay. All right. So listen, you're kind of selling me on this at this point.
I'm telling you, Balky, you got to come, and it's only for a couple of days. It's not that far away.
And I heard it is a massive party.
It's so much fun.
Yeah,
it is so much fun.
I definitely listen. I'm not saying no, but when Bob told me it was a week earlier this year, my eyebrow kind of raised, and I was like, maybe I can make it happen. We'll see, because I'd be very excited to hang out with you and everybody else there.
If nothing else, we'll see you in Vegas for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see him. I know I'll be out there for sure for that week. It's going to be a great 2026 season. And thank you so much, Scott, for hanging out with me tonight. We will talk with you again very soon.
Thanks, Balky. Have a good one.
Thank you so much, Scott. That is the 7-time FFPC League champ, FSGA board member, and CEO and founder of Fantasy Sports Strategies, the co-host of the Under the Hoodie podcast, where you can get anywhere you get podcasts. Scott Hoyt hanging out with me tonight. Great stuff from him. That's going to wrap up our show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I do want to remind you, FFPC Empire and Dynasty Empire Orphans available for as little as $1. We're coming into the home stretch there with all those orphans being posted. They will sell out shortly at the $100 level. 250s will probably be next. FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball and Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball tournaments. We're in the final 2 weeks of that as well. You can join those leagues and compete for a $40,000 and $10,000 grand prize. Why are we in the final weeks of that? Because once the NFL draft starts, those tournaments shut off. So if they have not yet reached capacity at that point, they will be turned off and you won't be able to draft in those Never Too Early tournaments. So check that out, myffpc.com. Check out the Gorillas, both big and baby. Featuring $1 million grand prize, the early Rampage tournament going on right now, as well as 7 Bananas promotion and the Baby Gorilla. If you always want to play FFPC high stakes fantasy football, you can do so now at just a $125 entry fee and still be eligible to win $100,000. Remember to like this video, subscribe to this channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live. Next Wednesday, we will be live again, another high stakes fantasy football hour at 10 p.m. Eastern time with Farrell Elliott. Next Thursday night, we'll be live, which, by the way, if you missed the Drew Davenport episode of FFPC Insider Access that we aired last night at 7 o'clock, you can watch that back on any of the YouTube socials, FFPC YouTube socials. This coming week, coming up on Thursday at 7 o'clock, we will be having on Jeremiah Retzlaff from Player Profiler, a podcast host on the Player Profiler Network. The coach will join us from 7 until 9 p.m. A massive Dynasty NFL draft preview with him coming up this Thursday at 7 p.m. And then, of course, extra reps 1 week from today will be Farrell Elliott, myself, and another great guest that we'll have for you next Friday as well. So a full week of podcast shows getting you ready for that NFL draft. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour Extra Reps for Scott Hoyt. I'm Eric Balkman. Thank you so much for watching, and your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.